I'm joined by Mary Katherine Ham, who may be wondering why I'm playing Stew Ball with Peter, Paul, and Mary. Any ideas, Mary Katherine Ham, why I picked this as your bump music today?
Well, luckily, I have a spy who was on your show yesterday and said you went after us for hating on folk music, but I didn't hate on anything. In fact, I was raised on an Ian and Sylvia album, so yep. I have all the respect.
I don't know. He brought up Mighty Wind. It sounded to me like you were saying, I love my dad. His music was so bad. He made me listen to the folk music, but I know, like I made my kids listen to folk music. Some of us like folk music, even if your haters out there don't, Mary Katherine Ham.
I mostly like it, although I did make fun of Ian and Sylvia. You weren't expecting that poll, were you?
No, I was not. I was not. I thought maybe you would go to Bob Dylan or Joan Baez. I came at you with Peter, Paul, and Mary. We actually had the we got one of those disc sets with folk music, and I made Adam play it all. I lost too many listeners doing that. Mary Katherine, I would normally just talk to you about getting hammered because I love it so much. I would talk to you about cutting into line and waiting with line with toddlers at the table and all that kind of thing. But I have to go to Donald Trump and I have to go to this trial because you're kind of an objective person. What did you make of De Niro yesterday?
I mean, it's embarrassing and it's wrong. The idea that they're making a campaign stop out of the first criminal trial of a former president who is the opponent of the sitting president, whose DOJ is part of this operation, having sent their third guy down to the prosecutor's office in Manhattan to handle this thing. It's, dare I say, Banana Republic stuff to go there and sort of celebrate it. And by the way, they only had to keep their mouths shut for like one more day, and they couldn't do it.
They couldn't do it. Mary Katherine, what about, I'm predicting a conviction. On my theory of that is someone's going to have TDS in that jury room, and eventually the other juries are going to want to escape. And that juror won't allow them to tell the judge it's over and it's deadlocked. What do you think's going to happen?
I am hoping against hope that there are a couple sensible people who do hold out. I would be the thorn in the side of those TDS folks in that room because I'm not generally always sympathetic to Donald Trump, but this is very obviously an overreach and a sham. And the more I read into the details, the worse it looks about how they're using the justice system against him. It, in fact, looks exactly like what Donald Trump says it is. And I don't think that action should be rewarded with success here. They have, by the way, the prosecution didn't even do the job, even with all of the things going in their favor. The deck is stacked as much as it can be. And they
you mean Judge Smales? Absolutely. I read Andy McCarthy, and I've watched him take apart Judge Smales' ruling again. Juan Merchan is going to be the new Judge Smales when they remake Caddyshack. But let me ask you, Mary Katherine, do you believe in TDS? I think it's a real thing. I've encountered it too many times. Not very common. I would guess 1% to 2% of the population has it. But boy, I think De Niro has it, and he's Exhibit A. Do you believe it actually exists?
Oh, for sure. I sat with people for many years at CNN whose judgment could otherwise be sound, but once when Trump was involved, they lost the ability to evaluate fairly or sensibly what was happening in the news. And now some of that is driven by incentives, but some of it is just driven by emotions, as I think it is with De Niro, who was, again, embarrassing. And besides the Banana Republic part of this, putting the super old actor up there who's sort of like doddering and ranting doesn't really give anything to the ticket of a man who's already sort of doddering and ranting, as Biden is. Like, this does not look young and vital. And one of the things I've thought about is, like, I'm not sure that young people who they're counting on to buy this democracy is at stake argument, they've grown up through Biden and Trump presidencies. This might be the first time they're voting. I'm not sure they see it as dire as the Biden administration would have them believe. They perhaps see their grocery bills as more dire than Robert De Niro's rant.
I agree with that. Now, in terms of why is what I really want to dig into with you. I'm sure you thought about it. Why do the people who have TDS have TDS? What is triggering it with them? Because it's not what some people just want to be Trump because they're Democrats and they want jobs. Some people want to be Trump because they like Joe Biden for whatever reason. Some people want single payer health care. but there are a lot of people who hate Trump. What is that based on?
I think some of this is the fact, some of it's real, what they're reacting to, that he is this unique political figure in American history. I think they're reacting to the fact that they have certain standards in their mind about who should be allowed to be in the upper echelon, who should be allowed to be elite, and he is not among them. Sometimes his behavior can be truly bad. I have not voted for him before because I have deemed him unfit because of his behavior. His Memorial Day truth post the other day, not great, even if he said some other fine things during the day. So I understand where they're coming from to a certain degree, but the behavior of one person can't change all of your values or your ability to honestly evaluate things, especially when the people who are trying to take him out are behaving just as badly, if not worse.
Mary Katherine, the question is, when did you decide with Vic to start this? Because Dwayne is exploring whether or not to do a podcast, and he's thinking about what to find a partner. And I told him, go listen to Mary Katherine and Vic. You got to have that kind of chemistry. How did you decide that you and Vic would do this and that you wanted to do it?
Yeah, so I was sort of approached by it by some people. People had asked me, like, do you want to do a podcast? And I know I don't do well by myself. I'm not a monologuer. I need someone to bounce off of. And by the way, I was also about to have my third child, which is a perfect time to take on a new professional endeavor. But I barreled straight ahead, and I brainstormed with some people, and I said, I think Vic would work for this. And they're like, I don't know. Let's talk about it. And I was like, no, trust me, Vic and I will work together. And as soon as we started, it was very obvious that chemistry was there. But yes, that back and forth has to feel comfortable and professional-ish. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yes, it's got, and I don't know who your producer is. She's fabulous, and she gets you stuff, including bad Slim Jims. And I don't know how much time you put into prepping the rundown, but you cover a lot of ground in under an hour, and it's about the perfect time for a half of a trundle for me, a long trundle. So I love it this way. How much time do you put into the outline beforehand? Do you actually have a sheet from which you work?
I do, because Vic likes to be prepared, whereas I like to wing it, as you might know, Hugh. But we do have a rundown. It's a little loose, but we like to have stuff on the plan. And sometimes I'll veer elsewhere. And I think some of our best work comes when we're talking about a random subject that came up while we were discussing the news. So we always like to be open to that while we're doing it, as you are as well.
My most memorable moment from this week's Getting Hammered, or Friday's Getting Hammered, is when you talked about your pet peeve about people who've been standing in line for a long time, then they get to the counter and they don't know what to order. I've been there. I agree with you. Where do you rate that against the person who either stops at the top of an escalator or the bottom of an escalator as you're coming up or down the escalator? Because that is, to me, the worst sin of all.
That's pretty clueless and could border on dangerous if you've got, especially, I'm thinking coming down the escalator with little kids behind someone like that, that's going to be a problem for me. So because of the danger level, I guess I'll give it the higher ranking, but I encounter the people who can't order a little more often.
Oh, they're everywhere. They might even be part of the store's method to get you to buy more. And then finally, cutting into line. There are rules about cutting into line. I don't know that your people broke the unwritten rule. They broke the unwritten rule by not knowing what they were going to order. But whenever the fetching Mr. Hewitt and I see someone cut into line, we always say that person went to USC. Because it actually, the first time it ever happened to us in a movie line, the guy was wearing a USC shirt. And USC people are entitled. What generally do you think goes through the mind of people who sneak into line, Mary Katherine?
Well, I think first you have to allow for the fact that they could not understand where the line is. And occasionally I have just told folks kindly, like, hey, by the way, line starts back there. And then they can fake it if they were trying to break in line and take the win and go to the back, or they can persist. But yeah, I think there is a certain amount of entitlement here. And when I was in middle and high school, there was a lot of just 14 friends would break in front of you in the lunch line. And I'm like, that's not allowed. We're in a civilization, people. But
all right. So now last question. We've got people who cut in line in restaurants and theaters. We've got people who stand at the bottom of escalators or the top of escalators. What do you make of the drivers who know that, for example, they got to get on the 395 to cross the Potomac, and the entrance at the 395 is always backed up. So they go up to the front and then they force their way in. It's not a mistake. I'm giving a pass to the clueless people who don't live in Northern Virginia, but some people do this routinely because they don't want to wait. Where do they rank in terms of moral perfidy?
Yeah, I hate this one. And I gotta say, Hugh, I have read some information and some data that suggests that people going up to the front and merging up there actually makes it faster for everyone. And I reject this data. I don't want to
reject that data
because I think it's impolite.
I don't want to know about that data. I reject it completely. We do not want to encourage that behavior. I've always thought they might have raised my insurance premium. Never fails. Then I tell myself, maybe someone's pregnant and having a baby, right? That's what I always tell myself.
There you go.
Maybe someone's got an emergency on their hands, but it's usually a cabbie. That doesn't count for cabbie.